Peace and love to everybody. My name is Ram Hotep, broadcasting on behalf of 13scienceastrology.com. That's the number 13, science plural, astrology.com. I'm doing this video pertaining to an inquiry that I got in relation to the planet Mars. And I was asked to do this video, and I was asked to address what does it mean if one has Mars as their ruling planet in their astrological chart. What does it mean if a person has Mars as their ruling planet in their astrological chart? And I can definitely answer that for you. The first thing you would have to do to understand what it means is to understand exactly what Mars is all about. And to understand what Mars is all about, you would have to go into a little bit of extraterrestrial information and a little bit of astronomical, not astrological, but astronomical information. And you would have to go into a little bit of history. And when I say extraterrestrial information, I'm actually addressing the history, because there is nothing that happened in this universe that extraterrestrial beings that came before your modern day human beings, they didn't have something to do with. Now Mars, as far as what it's known for, what it's known about, it's basically the planet of war. Many people are familiar with the book that men are from Mars and women are from Venus. Interesting book, but has a lot of truth to it. Because Mars is actually what we call in astrology a malefic planet, or malefic planet. And a malefic planet, the term male actually means rebellious, disagreeable even. So when we say that we are males, as men, when we say we are males, we're saying that we are more so disagreeable. And we got this attribute from the Mars projects that took place, or what's called the Adama Projects. And I've talked about this in other videos, but I'll talk about it again. On Mars, there is a complex called Sedona. And in this complex, I'm not going to go into all the information, but in this complex, an experiment took place. And this is where your first atoms, or your first modern humans, begin to get experimented on, and begin to get their genes altered, and came into existence. They came into existence from the Adama Projects. And the Adama Projects is basically when a Homo erectus being, which is a primitive version of a human, was abducted from this planet. Several Homo erectus beings were abducted from this planet and taken to Mars at the time. And they were taken to Mars to be experimented on by a group of Anunnaki. They were taken to Mars to be experimented upon, and this took place for over 49,000 years, and there were over 15 different experiments. And this is where you get your different Homo sapiens that came into existence during different time periods. There were Homo sapiens that had cat heads. There were Homo sapiens that had dog heads. There were Homo sapiens that had falcon heads. And even in ancient Kemet or Tamaray or ancient Egypt, you have information that is still documented on pyramid walls, where you see deities that were depicted as humanoid looking, but had features of extraterrestrials, or not of extraterrestrials, but of mammals. Excuse me, but of mammals. There's some extraterrestrials, believe it or not, but of mammals, of what you would call a mammal. So when you see your cat head beings, these weren't just depictions of symbology. These were physical beings that actually walked the surface of the earth at one point. And before your modern Homo sapiens came about, there were 14 different versions of Homo sapiens, or human beings, before your modern Homo sapiens came into existence. Now on the planet Mars, there were different beings that were taking part in these experiments under the banner of the term Anunnaki. Because Anunnaki is just a title that means those beings that came from the heavens to the earth. Those beings that descended from the heavens to the earth. But there are several different Anunnaki beings because we're talking about different species of Anunnaki. The Anunnaki was not one species. Some of them looked humanoid, melanated, like me. Some of them looked at pale, more so, Caucasoid looking Anunnaki from Venus. Some of them looked more like ants, creatures. Some of them looked more like reptilians and things of this nature. So they're different Anunnakis that descended to this planet. So in that, each Anunnaki, some of them had bases set up on Mars. And this is why I'm getting into, I'm still on Mars now, and this is why Mars is called the planet of war. It's called the planet of war because Mars is where extraterrestrial beings fought wars on Mars. This is where your rebellious warrior class extraterrestrial beings chose to live, on Mars. Because Mars was chosen because for various reasons. But for one thing, because the atmosphere was more friendly, the atmosphere on Mars is more friendly to these disagreeable type of beings. And what you have to understand is when I say disagreeable or malefic, this is not dealing with good and bad. Because good and bad deals with the human moral standard and code of this is good because it's good for you and this is bad because it's bad for you. So good and bad deals with the relationship that it has to you. But when I say disagreeable or malefic, we're speaking of the nature of these beings. It had nothing to do with human judgment on it. It's the nature of these beings. So when I say these beings were disagreeable, it's not based upon your definition of good and bad. So you can't say, oh, if they're disagreeable, that means they were bad. No, it doesn't mean that. It just means that their nature was one that may not have been agreeable with you, of course, but their nature was that of a disagreeable entity. So when Mars, so now I'm still on Mars, when a person has Mars as their ruling planet, and you would have Mars as your ruling planet, let me get into that. If you have Aries dominant in your chart, meaning that Aries is on your ascendant, which is your rising sign, Aries is where your sun is located, Aries is where your moon is located, Aries is where your Mars position is located. Anybody that has Aries dominant in their chart, basically, which means they have planets in Aries or whatnot, has the nature of Mars as one of their ruling planets. You can have various ruling planets too. And I'll do videos on other ruling planets, but we're talking about Mars here. Actually, Scorpio, people that have Scorpio as their as dominant in their chart has Mars as their ruling planet. So they go back to what this is that when your soul incarnates, it takes on different astrological traits based upon where you descended from or which beings or which star constellations that you descended from before you came here. So if you have Mars dominant in your chart, this means that you may have descended from more of a disagreeable species of extraterrestrials, meaning that more of a warrior class. When I say disagreeable, we're speaking of more of a rebellious warrior class of extraterrestrials. And this is what this means, more of a fiery class of extraterrestrial beings. The climate on Mars, believe it or not, is very similar to the climate on Earth, meaning that it gets up to 60 degrees on Mars. So humans can exist on Mars, and humans are living on Mars right now. They have over 300,000 humans that are living on Mars right now. So Mars is very much a planet that humans can exist on. Now it gets up to negative 200 degrees in the evening times, which means that it gets very cold. So we would die off on the nighttime during Mars. And but they have biospheres there for humans and different beings that can exist in those frigid temperatures for them to live on. So it's a fairly cold planet for the most part because it's further away from the sun and Earth, and the climate control on Mars is different. But humans can exist there. So if you have Mars in your chart, it just means that you come from that sort of history. You come from that sort of history. Now, I'm not making this up as far as humans having extraterrestrial linkages in their DNA, because scientists have found out in the genome projects that humans have over 24 different species of extraterrestrials in their DNA. Over 24 different species of extraterrestrials in their DNA, meaning that different extraterrestrials have experimented on us in our DNA. And when you trace our DNA back, this is why they call 97% of our DNA junk DNA. Because when you trace our DNA back, it's not junk DNA, it's just that they don't know what it is. See, it's only really about 5% of it is actually what you would call a true humanoid. Most of our DNA is mostly extraterrestrial based. So when you have different attributes like Mars or Venus or Saturn as your ruling planet in your chart, you have dominant features and dominant planets like Mars, Venus, Saturn, and other planets that are out there. This means that you go back when your past lives and who you are as a soul, because you're much more than this physical body, but who the soul that lives inside of you has a connection with those beings still. So if you have Mars dominating your chart, that means you have a connection with those disagreeable warrior class type of beings. This is why people that have Mars dominating their chart are very aggressive and warrior type of people, very strong people. Very strong people. And this is not bad. I don't judge anybody. And this is how when you get into astrology, you won't judge people because you know that everybody has traits about them that are based on their astrological sign. But see, I don't even stop at the astrological sign. See, most astrologers stop there. But I can trace back each planet in relation to the extraterrestrial connections that each planet has. Because each planet has extraterrestrial history on it. And you have to learn the extraterrestrial history on each planet. You see, the Martians, there are Greys that live on Mars, there are reptilians that live on Mars, there are a lot of beings that live inside of Mars, in biospheres. Some of them can exist on the surface on Mars. On Mars. Mars has longer nights and longer days because it's a little further away from the sun. So the days and the nights are longer. It revolves around this axis a little bit different than the Earth. It's a large planet. So people that are from Mars are very ancient people. They're very noble people. Your Aries, like I said, your Scorpios, and people that have these, and not only just if you're Aries or a Scorpio, but you can have Mars strong in your chart based on certain aspects in your chart. And an aspect is a relationship that the planet has with another planet. So there are certain aspects, planetary aspects, that may relate to each other that will bring out Martian attributes inside of a person. So this is what it means by a person that has Mars dominant in their chart, Mars ruling in their chart. They're a rebellious, warrior type of person, you know, very aggressive, strong-willed, very independent, you know what I'm saying, and very intelligent too, because Aries rules the head. So that means you have a lot of Aries traits, and Aries in medical astrology, which I'm going to get into more, Aries rules the head. See, each star constellation rules a different aspect of your body. So astrology can be looked at from a lot of different angles, but this is what it means as far as the planet Mars, and I'll do other videos in the future. But this is the interpretation of what it means as to whether or not you have Mars dominant in your planet. This is the interpretation of it. It means that you trace yourself back, like I said, to very ancient times, very strong beings or whatever. There are wars that took place in the cosmos, and you go back to the warrior class of beings. There are some beings that they won't partake in war. They don't believe in war at all, period. And those are your more noble extraterrestrials. Not to say that Martian beings aren't noble, but I'm just speaking of those are your extraterrestrials that are more refined, that deal with things more on a mental level. These are your extraterrestrials from Mercury and, you know, from other planets or whatever. So it very much depends on a lot of different factors as to how your chart will come out, because like I said, you can have multiple beings inside of you. You may be a Mars dominant being, but then you may have Venus in your chart that's dominant as well, or you may have the Sun is as dominant in your chart, or you may have Saturn that's dominant in your chart. So it just depends on a lot of things, and as an astrologer I can help you out with that. But this is what Mars means. This is the history of Mars and what it means to us astrologers, and what it means when one has Mars dominant in their chart. So I hope this helps. For more information and enlightening videos, feel free to visit my website, 13scienceastrology.com. And I appreciate you guys for watching this video, and I wish you peace.